Hello everybody, I'm Casey, and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk About. Today, let's talk about the Powerpuff Girls Reboot. So, this is finally out. Alright, before I go into this reboot, let me quickly go over my history with the Powerpuff Girls. The Powerpuff Girls was one of the biggest shows from my childhood. It was one of my favorite shows as a kid. Me and my sister absolutely loved it, and we weren't the only ones. In case you don't know, which you probably don't if you're under the age of 16, this show was a huge hit. Like, arguably the biggest hit Cartoon Network has ever had. Which is why this exists in the first place, but we'll get to that in a second. I haven't marathoned the show or anything since its original run, outside of seeing some episodes when they rerun on Boomerang, so I rewatched a bunch of episodes from season 1 to get a feel for the show again, especially for how it began. I also wanted to wait until a decent amount of episodes of the reboot had come out to properly judge. As I'm writing this, about a dozen episodes have been released, so I think now's a good time to talk about it. As for the show itself, I kind of hate that I kind of don't hate this. Wait, hear me out. Look, this show isn't good. There are a lot of problems with it, and yes, the twerking was terrible, and I hated it. But do I think it's as horrible as everyone says? Well, let's take a closer look. Let's start with the animation, which is okay. I mean, it's not great, but it's serviceable, I guess. A bunch of people have pointed out the various animation errors in the show, but outside of one or two, none of them were very distracting, so I'm willing to let those slide. After all, remember how weird and off-model the first few episodes of Steven Universe looked? Now, if these problems continue as the show goes on, then that's where it'll become a problem, but honestly, it's just too early to tell. Still, the animation isn't very dynamic, which is probably why these errors stick out more. The original kept the action and humor quick and exciting, but here it's just average. There's nothing really exciting or expressive about it. Stuff just kinda happens, and it's just kinda dull. This is weird to me because the storyboard art is actually very expressive, and the show could look a lot better if they stuck to these movements. But for whatever reason, the animation is just kind of bland. But animation is only half of the performance in a cartoon. There's also the voice acting. Now yes, it is a great shame that the girls' original voice actors were not contacted to reprise their roles. While I still don't understand why everyone else was called back to reprise their roles except for them, I wasn't going to immediately vilify the new voice cast because of that. So, how are the new girls? Well, as far as impersonations, I actually think they're pretty good. Buttercup sounds like a ready-for-action tomboy, Bubbles sounds like a cheery, bubbly little girl, and Blossom sounds like the leader. The voice acting itself doesn't seem to be the problem here. There are problems with the performances, but it's mostly in, well, the performing. And that's not unique to the girls. The returning cast seems to be struggling with their performances as well, and they actually have experience with these roles. So the issue with the performances probably comes down to bad voice direction. Although the writing isn't helping either. The characterization is really weird in this show, at least as far as the girls are concerned. Buttercup has gotten the most attention so far and the most focused episodes. I'd say she's getting the best treatment out of all the girls, but she's also really flanderized. All of her flaws are cranked up to 11 to make a conflict happen. Bubbles, on the other hand, seems to have the opposite problem. For being the fan favorite Powerpuff, Bubbles hasn't really gotten much attention in the show so far. She's mostly there for comic relief, which is an entirely different problem, but we'll get to that later. When she does get the spotlight, sometimes she is just as cute and innocent as she was before. But other times, she gets angry really quickly. Yeah, Bubbles got really mad in the original, but those moments were few and far between, which is what made it funny. But here, it happens so much more sporadically. Imagine if Fluttershy got as angry as she did at that dragon in small moments every time something remotely ticked her off. That's Bubbles. But she's still cute and happy and loves animals, and those are the moments that work. Surprisingly, it's Blossom who suffers the most from the changes made. Instead of being the level-headed leader who tried her best to follow the rules, she's a know-it-all neat freak. Yeah, sure, Blossom was smart and neat in the original, but those traits didn't define her personality. She pretty much took on the role of big sister, and looking out for her sisters and leading them into battle in good and bad ways was where she shined. Sometimes that happens here, but it's very hit and miss. Mostly because the girls barely fight crime. Instead of being a show about superheroes who were also adorable little girls, this show seems to be more about little girls who happen to fight crime. They still use their powers as regularly as they did in the original, but it's mostly for slice-of-life scenarios, and that's not what the Powerpuff Girls are. What made them so special is how much they were able to kick butt and still act like little girls. Here, even when the girls do get to fight crime, they are bad at it. Despite getting some upgrades, their powers are a lot weaker, and they are hurt and defeated way easier than they were before. The slice-of-life scenarios really aren't that interesting either, and sometimes they're just downright weird. For example, there's an episode where the girls wake up after a slumber party with no memory of what they did the previous night because they ate too much candy. Yeah, so this episode is basically The Hangover with the Powerpuff Girls. Adorable! I don't know if there's someone out there who wants to watch the Powerpuff Girls act drunk, but I really don't. There's also an episode where Bubbles enters a beauty pageant that has almost every major villain from the original show competing, which was apparently a setup by him to get someone to wear this possessed crown. Now I thought he was going to try and get Bubbles to wear it and put her under his control. But nope. Princess wins the crown and him was just doing this for a quick laugh, I guess. Most of the episodes are filled with awkward jokes and weird cutaway gags. Yes, the Powerpuff Girls now have cutaway gags. Just go with it. This is why Bubbles being mainly comic relief is a big problem, because most of the jokes just fall flat or are downright bizarre. There actually were a few jokes that made me laugh.
Okay, rock, paper, scissors. Go! 1, 2, 3. Scissors? Man, I always lose this game.
But either because of the way they're animated, performed, or just written, more often than not, it just doesn't work. Besides, slice-of-life stories are mostly character-driven, which makes these episodes even weaker because, for the most part, the girls are very weak and flanderized characters. I would say that they're just trying to make this a completely separate show and just geared towards a different audience, but honestly, this show really isn't kind to the uninitiated. Many characters from the original show are either introduced or referenced without any kind of context. The episode Tiara Trouble is a good example of this, but one of the biggest examples is the first appearance of Mojo Jojo in The Stayover. Mojo is introduced to this new audience in a girly outfit in the girls' room after that crazy slumber party. And you're sitting there going, what? Who is this guy? How do you know him? Why are you kind of okay with a mutated monkey in your house? Yeah, Mojo kind of dropped into the story in the original show, but at least the show set him up as a villain. You knew this guy was trouble, especially since his big gimmick was him rambling on and on about how evil he was. But here, he shows up with no context for one joke, and then is never mentioned again. I will give them credit that the introduction of Princess Morbucks and Princess Buttercup established who she was a lot better, but the villains aren't the only ones with this problem. The episode Bye Bye Bellum is completely dedicated to writing Miss Bellum out of the show. Yes, this is a complete injustice to the character. Yes, the reason they wrote her out of the show is stupid, but once again, she is not mentioned in the show at all up to this point. Yeah, we know who she is, and have probably gained even more respect for her since she apparently never took a vacation day, but the new audience doesn't, and therefore have no connection to this character. What are we supposed to feel here when we have no idea why she was so important, and why the mayor is so sad that she left? Look, I'm not a fan of Miss Bellum being written out either, but if you don't want her in the show, why include her at all? Why not just leave her out altogether? Sure, old fans would still be upset, but at least you wouldn't be asking your new audience to care about the departure of a character you don't even want in the show. They don't even explain what the girls are. In the original, the opening makes it clear that the professor created them. But while the opening theme here is pretty cool, it just says that they're awesome superheroes. And so far, there hasn't been anything referring to their origins. There's even a joke in one of the episodes reenacting the scene where the professor created them. But it doesn't work if your new viewers don't know how the girls were created. This seems to be attempting to be a sequel to the original show, since the girls do seem a little older, but it fails at this as well. If you don't know the Powerpuff Girls, you'll be lost or confused, and if you do know the Powerpuff Girls, you'll be annoyed and disappointed. So I don't really know who this show is for. And that's the back and forth I feel when watching this. I don't think this show is devoid of value. There are a few funny jokes and some fun action scenes. Heck, there's even a few good character moments. But none of this is capable of saving the show. This reboot seems to have a lack of identity. It can't seem to decide what it wants to be. If it was just continuing the original story, if it was just a separate incarnation, if it was just a slice of life comedy, then at least we could label it and get a better sense of what the show is at least trying to do. Yeah, I know what the show is really trying to do, but just because a show is made to sell toys doesn't automatically mean it's going to be bad. If you get the right people and give them enough freedom, you can create something that's creative, entertaining, and sometimes even compelling. This show isn't the worst thing ever, but it is very clumsy and confused. If you really hate this show, I get it. There are a lot of problems with it. But as much as I love the original Powerpuff Girls, and I truly do, I just couldn't bring myself to be angry at this. If anything, I'm disappointed. I'm not sure if that's better or worse, but I am very disappointed that the Powerpuff Girls, who helped jumpstart this golden age of animation, come back right in the middle of it and, either because of choices by the staff or executive decisions, they can't share in the glory of it. But hey, look at it this way. With this show, the Powerpuff Girls are a household name again, most likely to kids who have never heard of them. And every episode of the original show is available on Netflix. So maybe this will give the original show a new audience that it may not have had otherwise. Or as the original one said, "There's no good without the bad." So as much as I think this reboot is a confused mess, I do think it's worth at least watching one episode. So for my money, the episode Power Up Puffs is pretty much the closest in tone with the original that you're going to find, at least of the dozen or so episodes that are out right now. The girls' new aura powers are pretty cool, which lead to some fun action sequences, and the girls' interactions are probably the best they've been so far. It's still not a great episode, but it is the best one I've seen so far. Now with all that out of the way, I am going to tell you the absolute best thing about this reboot. Cartoon Network made a website where you can turn yourself into a Powerpuff Girl. I get to become a Powerpuff Girl? Worth it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.